I fear. So we have neighbors who, hope this is, who put up a big seawall without permit.
actually has a very bad relationship with one of the
And
local bugs.
do you know there's no permit?
Yeah, because road association president's really pissed, and so I went through to DEP. The town has not issued one. And so I checked with DEP, and it's not, doesn't fit the permit by rule, it's like 12 feet tall. Boulders.
Riprap?
Well, boulders.
We don't know.
Is that riprap?
Yeah. Bad memory.
Thank you, Jay. Maybe your breath smell like bananas.
I don't get the connection there.
No, it doesn't smell like bananas?
No.
Which is interesting, because my house smelled like bananas, because it just took some banana breads out of the
Oh.
oven. Before COVID.
It didn't bring back memory graph from elementary school.
They want to know if we might have fire, but we don't.
Hello, all.
Boy.
I'm echoing back at me. I'm going to start the meeting. We have a quorum now.
Yep.
So I'll open the meeting and at
407.
4:07. And we'll start with the minutes, which I neglected to put on here, I just noted. The minutes went out this afternoon or yesterday evening, I forget. If everybody's had a chance to look at them, if not, there's copies here
The only thing I saw was Deirdre's name is a bit misspelled.
still. I've changed her name so many times, that must be the wrong template. So we will correct her name. Yeah, I'll take one. I had made some changes when Mose originally sent it to me.
Sure. Yeah, and those were just accepted changes, so that's what we're working with, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I move we pass approved minutes with Deirdre's name corrected.
A second?
Second,
All in favor? Okay, great. Now let's get the right agenda. So just a quick review, well, as announcements, as you know, the Maine Wake came out with its new updated climate action plan, and it's not, I'm trying to forget what they're calling it now, but anyhow, they're updating the original, here's Deirdre. Have a seat.
Good. Got
This
your
is
usual
yours.
spot down there.
Yeah. So they've come up with the new plan, which is quite lengthy, and the link will take you to the online version of it. There is a focus this year of really looking at the working waterfront and damage from the last storm. There is additional focus being put on that, which I think a couple of us have gone to some webinars recently by the state, in fact, that this has become the focus of it. Jay and I went to one, was it 2 weeks ago, Jane and Jay? And then today, you might mention, you heard something on
yeah,
Maine,
Maine Calling.
Maine call-in.
Yeah, today at NPR, at Maine Calling, it'll be archived, you can see it.
Yeah, and I think it'll
And
be
it was-
repeated tonight.
Shelley and Island Institute, and they were talking about the storm damage. And that more storms, more need for response, if there's not enough money to do it quickly, let alone ever, was my thought. But preparedness and what to do. The thing that really struck me was like, I was saying to Ken and Mary Ann, was like a no-brainer, but they were talking about, people talk about the storm of 78 and how bad that was, and it was, they said on this program that was worse in intensity than what we had this winter, but because sea level's higher, the impact was much worse now. It's like, oh, that makes sense. So it's good.
That's a pretty notable example to be able to use if you're explaining to people the impact of rising sea level.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that was the great thing that came out of the program that I've heard online during, well, the webinar last week too, is that Island Institute has put a real good slide deck together, which I sent you, and also the program is, they're making it, making the relationships and talking about why it's different, pretty much. So I think it'll be helpful to us as we go forward.
Is the other increased focus social vulnerability?
Yes.
Yeah.
And social vulnerability is another thing they were talking about, and emergency services, which is a good segue into the planning grant that we're working on now. If we're past that, finished on that. After going to that, I realized that I think our grant will be stronger, which we tried to do by introducing ways we're going to use the information from that grant in educational forums and working with partners. Ha is writing a letter of support. Holbrook's Community Foundation wrote a letter of support, where we will take that information, work with our partners to dispense the information to the people, whether it's in the form of a workshop or whatever.
I need the address on here as well. So the address of this building, 263.
Yes.
Road. Okay, it says 268 in two places on.
Oh, really?
That's over in the cove across the street.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Holly. I didn't realize that. I forget where I got the address the first time from, and then I pick it up each time. So, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at what was sent this afternoon with the update. We can talk about it a little bit more. I'm trying to remember, I got some changes. Nancy West sent me changes, but I haven't had a chance. Not changes so much, but additions and embellishing the social vulnerability aspect. And those would have to be put in. Did you want to say something?
No.
Nope, okay.
I had general things, a couple around Ha. One is, I think I added the part about, as sort of the outcome, the meeting, Ha would work with this. But do we have Ha buy-in on that? That was sort of my assumption when I added that. Let me find the page under.
It's under.
It's under results or outcome.
Okay.
Yeah, it said, town will work with Harpswell Agent Home on how to use the tool, et cetera. Is that, do we have buy-in? I know
Well,
they're
yes,
partner
Ken.
on this, but I just.
That was a wonderful suggestion, and it made me contact Ha
Yeah,
and
okay.
Holbrook's.
Yeah.
And it was really good that you put that in, because it just was kind of the avenue to start working that and put it as more, even as a point in the grant itself.
Okay, I just didn't want to commit to them if they weren't
No, they-
in on it. The other thing occurred to me, I think back to page 11, it mentions under community engagement, so, there's mention about Harpswell Agent Home meal delivery service. Should we somewhere, probably before then, define a little bit more what HA does? I mean, I think Maine Coast fishermen's people are familiar with, and I think someone not familiar with it might not realize all the different things HA does, because they sort of start out, I think, the more home repairs, and then they evolved to meals, and so I just didn't know somewhere we want to sort of flesh out a little more, what they do.
What I was going to say was that Ha, in their letter, explained that. Now, maybe we can figure a way to take a piece of that from that letter
Yeah.
and insert it in the proper place in here.
We have really spiffy organizational charts that show all the
Really
committee
good
and all
organizational
the
charts.
programs, so could that be an
Could that be just
addendum?
appendix, or,
We use it in an appendix, yeah.
yeah,
So
that's
I'll send
good.
that to you.
Just,
That's great.
if someone's reviewing it, they just might realize that it gives a little more credibility that they're a part, having this as a partner.
Yeah.
And
I-
in the letter, which we redrafted and hopefully will be fine, it goes into some of it, but could include the website they won't look at that though, but
No.
we could.
No, but,
And also, Ha is famous.
Oh,
I mean, seriously.
among these grant reviewers, I hope that's true, but
well, it's interesting too, is I was looking for something on Han, I said, they have the best webpage. It is really good. It's it's laid out well, I think.
It's Leanne Grillo.
Is that who did it? Leanne did it?
Well, she's the person who keeps it up, or the originators were others, but
Yeah, but it's
she's the reason we have such great communication.
it's really excellent, I think, because it's very concise and it's very clear. And,
Similarly, for that letter, I went to the town website to look for, and there isn't anything. There isn't like a paragraph about Harpswell. I dug around, I got it here
I'm
and
sorry,
there.
and where? Oh, you mean
On
just about the town itself?
Town website. Shouldn't you open it and it says, Harpswell's amazing? Instead of, instead of having to click on different things, like you could click on home, which should have a blurb, I think.
I think that's a really good suggestion to make to the administration.
Okay. Administration? I mean, the website is very pretty and has good information, but just a thumbnail, I think, was what I was looking for.
Yeah, no, it's good, it's a good comment, actually. I have got to,
Do you think the
Yes.
charts would accomplish what you're,
I think I would totally accomplish it because it shows all the things they do and, how organized it is. I mean, I think indirectly you're saying if you have this, you aren't 3 volunteers meeting out of someone's garage.
yeah.
right.
I'll send it around. See, pretty?
Yeah, just,
Oh, okay.
just send it
That's
to,
right,
yeah. I'll need it to put, when I put it together, I'll need what you call it.
You'll need one.
I'll need a copy of it, so I'll have to put it in the grant package. Hmm. So I think we're just about,
Nice job getting to this point.
feels good, doesn't it, Ken? We're usually doing it, I mean, I'm not gonna say it too loudly, I'll whisper it, but we're usually doing it much later.
Good. Anything back from the engineering firm?
Yes,
Oh,
basically, he got back to me today
okay.
and said that they could do a written proposal for us. But he also had some questions that he thought we might want to discuss. So I was talking with Matt to see if we could set up a Zoom meeting in the next couple of days
Okay.
to hear what, we haven't talked to him at all. We had this terse email going back and forth.
Yeah.
And so I would like to do that, because my sense is we might need something a little bit more than we're asking for.
Yeah.
Or, and if you would like to be part of that, let me know.
Ken, like I said, I will be out of town Friday through Monday, but
That's right, you told me that
But-
already,
but-
yeah.
whatever.
Ideally, like to do it this week.
Who are you talking about?
Scott Hayward was the person that worked on the new floodplain maps for Harpswell.
And what firm is he with?
He's now with Stantec. There were three original engineers that worked on the program for Harpswell originally. Lila Pike, Scott Hayward, and Nathan Dill? Nathan, I think it's Nathan Dill. They all worked for Ransom Environmental at the time. None of them work there any longer. Nathan and Scott are with Stan Tech, and Lila is with GEI. So, what I found out in speaking with Lila is that the project that, you know, that the town undertook with the other towns, which was a
The cohort with
Cohort
West Bath and
two.
Phippsburg.
West and Scarborough, and anyhow, it was because it wasn't, it was felt that the FEMA maps were not correct enough for our topography. And they worked it out, so many of the towns, many of the places in town who would have been in the flood, needed flood insurance, no longer needed it. We want to take that map now, because it's more specific to Harpswell, and add these layers for sea level rise to better estimate. So, what was your original question?
What if we reach with them? I think sort of the follow-up other thing we talked about is, and I think that would be discussion for the Zoom, is exactly what they would be providing. Would
Right.
it just be a digital file? Would it be, we keep saying interactive, but I think that's, you know, if I was reviewing a grant application, interactive can mean a lot of different
Yeah.
things. I think
You brought that up.
interactive.
What we took was, Mark had originally laid a general description of what he thought would be good for us to get funding to do. I took that description and sent it to Scott. He got back with 3 different options, which basically are spelled out in the scope of work in the ordinance. I mean, in the grant. I think it's important for him to talk with him, to make sure that what we think we're getting is spelled out there, or maybe something additional should be added to that. And basically, as I said, whatever in the grant is, I took verbatim from his offer.
That's Mark Ironman?
No, from Scott Hayward,
Good.
the engineer.
But you said Mark,
Mark gave us the original description,
and that's Mark Ironman.
Mark Ironman,
Yeah.
yes. I then sent that to to him, Scott. He looked at that and came back with 3 proposals, of which we're picking the most comprehensive. So, but having never had a discussion with them, I think it would be beneficial to do so.
Yes.
Did you want to add anything to that, Matt?
I'm gonna be
Mark?
asking him at that meeting about what the workflow is going to be, so if we are feeling like something is, you know, later on in the process, feeling like something isn't enough, we'll know what's possible for him to adjust. Cause I anticipate that might be something that happens, regardless of how much due diligence we do in the front end here. But if we decide later on that we want him to take on more, I think we should know how easy that might be. And if we're gonna have to totally rework everything, or if you can just slip in another data point, or what be it. So I'll be asking him about what the workflow for him is going to be, how long it's gonna take to produce it. And I think we wanna really narrow down what we mean by interactive, because our current shoreline zoning map, you know, you can click on it on your property and it will bring up the information for your property, and probably something similar to that will be good enough. And I think, you know, if individuals in the town could click on it and have even more data with this wave run-up study, that'd be great to have. I don't think much more than that is probably gonna be necessary.
Right.
Just, it would, I think you get diminishing returns in terms of complexity with those kind of things. It's just gonna end up being hard to navigate if the map is too.
And I think one of my other questions was, sort of where would this information live? Could it be, would it have to be on the engineering firm site and might have a limited lifespan? Or could it be live on the Harpswell site where we would have control over it? We don't have to worry about 18 months from now, all of a sudden it's gonna drop off, or if the firm gets sold, or something like that. That was,
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about trying to get as few amount of clicks from the town website to the map as possible, or from the homepage to the town website to the map itself, because there's some things on the town website that really are kind of buried and hard for people to find, so, hopefully this will be something accessible straight from the town website.
So, it's funny, I keep going back to what we have already, that was basically a layer that was done, and then it was put into able to be Google activated. We got a KMZ, yeah, layer that you can just put on your Google map that shows you the various levels of sea level rise. And I mean, that's kind of what we're going to be looking for here. But here again, I might have something completely wrong in my thinking. The current floodplain maps, where are those? Those are online, right?
Yes, well, there's the floodplain maps, there's the ones that are specific for Harpswell and
Right.
have all of our
Yeah,
stuff on
those.
them, and also the regular FEMA ones, which aren't as accurate, because a lot of ours have been kind of reworked. I usually let Margaret gather those up, so I don't know exactly where to find them, to be honest with you.
I guess that goes back to your question, Ken. It'd be nice to know where that file lives.
Yeah.
I just don't want it someday to happen to vanish if, the
Yeah.
company
Right,
goes out, does something,
Right.
so.
yeah.
All good thoughts. Howie, you looked like you had a question. Okay.
I was gonna ask you about support from fishing community, but you have Maine Coast Fishermen's. Are they gonna submit a letter? And
She's,
Holbrook already.
I contacted Monique. She said she'd have to get back to me this week sometime. And Harbor and Waterfront is.
Oh, good.
And Billy Saxon's gonna do one on his own, as just a community member fisherman. And,
Great.
and I didn't know if we should be reaching out anywhere else.
I was thinking about tourism, but I don't know that that's where we wanna go with this focus.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I did have one more thought addition, on there again, I think on the outcome, we mentioned the, waterfront community and would we also want to mention possibly a general public forum with emphasis possibly on road associations as another outreach?
Do you have a place for me to pop that in?
I was thinking it'd be a third bullet under project outcomes. That'd be more what the town, would additional town
Okay.
follow-up at completion. Page 10.
Page 10. Okay. Did you say that again?
Basically, have a third mail, we talked about wanting to meet specifically with members of the Working Waterfront Committee.
Right.
We talked about working with on providing expertise on how to interpret it, but I would think my third one would be maybe a general meeting, town would sponsor it, meeting, cover it, but make extra effort to include, road associations.
Good idea. We've been talking about this on Conservation Commission as well. So, not for this particularly, but for other water-related issues.
Do you want me to draft that?
Sure.
No pause.
You're so eloquent. Okay, is there anything else anybody would like to add to that?
Would the Conservation Commission fit in here as well?
We could, we talked about it, I sort of, the way we were doing this, the Conservation Commission has really been the spearhead for the roads. However, we're mentioning roads here, but it's not the focus of this.
Right.
I don't know, what do you think, Deirdre?
Not sure, maybe, can we talk about it?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think what the key would be to focus on.
Well, I guess what made me think of it was how interactive the various efforts of Harpswell are. At this committee is an example, with so many committees represented. And the real strength, in my opinion, is that there is that connectivity between this committee, the committees that are represented in this committee, including Conservation Commission is represented. Somehow make that point that, we're amazing.
Let's figure out, so we can, if it fits in and
If it
adds
fits.
to it, I think, and if anybody comes up with something special, please send it around. I have to say, I'm not coming up with really ideas quickly, and I have to really struggle for a while, so,
Okay.
in some cases I am. Okay, anything else?
Just to add to that, I guess my point too is the information won't be stuck on a shelf somewhere. It'll be interactive in the sense that it'll be used.
Well, I think, yes, that's a good point. We can bring that out more as we talk about our partners.
Yeah,
Sort of said it subtly, maybe we should not be quite so subtle,
yeah, maybe.
yeah.
Looks great.
So, all right,
One more question. The other grant option that was talked about, the carrying capacity,
yeah,
are they gonna submit a grant as well?
not, put it this way, they're looking for a different grant.
The one we talked about, like the river with.
The one with the
NCOG?
rivers, they're looking at the Maine outdoor heritage.
Yeah,
That's the one they're looking at.
okay.
Okay. All right. Well, we have some visitors tonight. I'll let you start. Now, the only thing I'm going to ask is, those microphones, make sure the lights are on.
Okay.
And kind of make sure you're talking into them when you're talking, because I am recording. I'm neglected to say it too loudly. So.
Well, I can get started because I have a bit of a different focus than Gail and Martha do on this project. Many of you might not know me. My name is Abby Westbury. I've never attended these meetings before, regardless. So I'm working with Maine Coast Fishermen's Association. I totally blanked on my organization's name there, embarrassingly. But we're doing a grant in Harpswell and several other towns that's administered by FEMA and Mid-Coast to look at storm resilience, storm preparedness, and particularly the mental health impacts after the January storms last year. So all of us have been pretty active in talking to members of this community around their experiences with the January storms, the effect afterwards that they kind of had to continue living with, and what things could better support them as we face more storms in the future. I have a different focus with Maine Coast Fishermen's Association. My focus has been looking at our working waterfront community members and how they've been dealing with the impacts and kind of legacy of the January storms hanging over their heads for almost a year now. And I know Gail and Martha have some questions they wanted to guide their presentation with. I just wanted to have a few takeaways of things that I've heard talking to Harpswell's fishing communities that might be relevant to your work on this committee. So I had 4 quick takeaways I wanted to go over. The first one is that Harpswell's working waterfront communities are resilient. This town received some of the most aid coming from the state and other organizations after the January storms, but Harpswell's infrastructure is not resilient. Not very much at all. Despite a lot of that aid being received, many people who rebuilt after the January storms last year didn't rebuild with resilience in mind. They rebuilt with practicality in mind, needing to build their own docks, repair their own infrastructure or materials before the fishing season, was too badly impacted by the storms. So what you see in a lot of instances throughout Harpswell is people have rebuilt, but they've rebuilt the same as it was before, not any more, any less resilient. Secondly, in Harpswell's fisheries, you really need to keep in mind that fishermen are dealing with a lot of compounding challenges right now because of climate change and because of other issues. Fishermen and our working waterfront communities are really on the front line of climate change and are experiencing those effects a lot more rapidly and devastatingly than many other communities are. There are things like declining stocks, change in the regulations around which fish you can capture and harvest. They're having new gauge increases to the lobster fishery coming in next year, which is the big example of that. It means you can catch about 10% less lobsters next year because of these new regulation changes than you would have been able to catch this year. There are new whale requirements coming in that might revolutionize the way gear is used in the fishery and require a significant amount of investment on fishermen into buying new gear. There are challenges in relation to offshore wind, which might be more of a symbolic threat now that a new administration is coming into the office, but are still a threat in many fishermen's minds. And there are just the practical things of increasing costs for bait, gear, boats, materials, increasing costs associated with storm damage and storm preparedness, and increasing costs for trying to grapple with all the new regulations coming in. So, when we're talking about climate preparedness in our working waterfront communities, I think we have to have the lens in mind that there's a lot fishermen are already kind of actively struggling with, trying to deal with, and any adaptation needs to have that lens as a focus. Thirdly, I only have 2 more after this and they're quick. A lot of the things fishermen describe needing in Harpswell are the same things that just would be good for community members. Things like greater communication and information to fishermen after storms happen with regards to what they should do, how they should recover, and what aid might be in place. A lot of concerns around roads, the accessibility of roads as things flood or trees and lines come down, making it impossible for fishermen to get to their homes or their businesses. And then a real desire to have more support either from the town or from the state for resiliency preparation. Fishermen do want to prepare for storms. They do want to prevent themselves from getting hit by what we had last January, where the storms put a lot of fishermen out of business for several months. So preparation is in mind. It's just when fishermen are told to prepare but aren't given any resources or guidance as to how to do so, that's when there can be quite a bit of friction with regards to questions of resilience. And last, I just wanted to bring up the emotional impact of the storms in this community. A lot of members of our working waterfront community are really stressed and really concerned about the future as climate change gets worse and worse. A big way that this manifests is I've talked to the Harpswell school system and heard about how a lot of children who used to assume that they would go into fishing businesses like their previous generations and their family have done so, now have a question mark about their future and uncertainty about whether or not they'll be able to carry on the business that their family has, made a legacy of. More and more students coming in and saying things to their teachers or counselors about the fisheries are dead, or Mills is going to kill lobstering, those sorts of things. And it's all a reflection of how the emotional impact of the storms translates from the home, from the household, from what children hear their parents say, into their actual experience in school and their kind of understandings of themselves. Those are my big 4 takeaways of talking to our working waterfront communities, what they've been saying. I've kind of joined this meeting today with this MCFA focus on the working waterfront communities for 3 reasons. Firstly, just to join the conversation if you all have any questions or want to chat about the working waterfront communities and preparedness. Secondly, going into the 2025 winter, we are really concerned that we're going to get hit again. So what we did want to kind of have people know is that if you do know any fishermen who might struggle with storms or be wondering about preparedness, please feel free to refer them to me or Monique with this program, and we'll try and work them through preparing for stuff. And lastly, my last point is your job on this committee and in your regular life means, and also in preparing for storms and doing things around storm resiliency and stuff, can get really emotionally stressful. And you're often dealing with people who are at some of the worst positions in their life. In this job with reaching out to our working waterfront communities in Harpswell, I've had a lot of really emotionally difficult conversations of people not knowing if their house, if their livelihood is going to survive the next storm. And that can get really tough on you and without having kind of a knowledge of how to grapple with those situations well. So MCFA is organizing a mental health first aid training here in Harpswell. It's December 19th. Mental health first aid is just basically like a first aid course, except the mental side of things. In first aid, you learn if you have a cut, you put on a bandage. Sorry, Martha, the nurse expert here. Mental health first aid says if someone's having a panic attack, if someone can't stop crying, if someone feels emotionally overwhelmed, what's the bandage in those situations? So if in your job or volunteering on this committee you've had any issues with kind of mental health out in your work, please feel free to let me know if you'd like any more info on this project.
December 19th?
December 19th,
Okay.
it's 8:30 till 4, and it's free. Yeah. That's it. Gail and Martha, I'm sorry I took so much time away from you two.
Gail Hayes, Bailey Island, and
Martha Israel, Cundy's side.
we were hired by Maine Health to help them fulfill a grant. And the grant comes through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Agency of the state of Maine. We are also volunteers at Harpswell Aging at Home. And it's through Harpswell Aging at Home that we are actually, we come under their auspices. We're paid by Maine Health minimally. But anyway, so we're looking at the psychological, and we're supposed to be, looking at the psychological and emotional impacts that the older community has been feeling during this post-storm period. We have been going out to committees in town, to organizations, to book clubs, whatever we can find. We've been going out to talk with them. And the things that we're talking about to them is, we ask, first of all, what was the impact to you? And we give them little cues. Did you have power? Did you have potable water? Did you have food? Were you food insecure? Did you have enough medications? Were you able to get out from your home? So we kind of cued them on different aspects of what can happen when you have an emergency. What we've gotten back is that people are most concerned about trees falling. That is the biggest, and it's, is it gonna fall on my house? Is it going to block my way to get out? And what's it gonna cost me to take care of the trees that come down? We've also talked with some road associations, one road association, and talked with them about the fact that if trees come down, it's up to the association to take care of those trees. It's not up to somebody else. The other concerns have been, is the causeway down at the end of 123, is that going to be flooded again? Am I going to be able to get out? What's the emergency services for me? Yes, there are some EMTs that live all over town. However, there's not an ambulance. There's not the things that you need when you are confined to a space and yet you have a medical emergency. The second one is, in that same vein, there's two of them actually, two more, is the causeway out on Long Point, and what happens if something happens to the Bailey Island Bridge. How are people going to get emergency services? How are they going to get to and fro the island if something happens to the bridge? So those were a lot of the concerns. And then loss of food. The greatest thing that we've seen is that as we speak in these groups, people start talking about how they can help each other. And they, oh, I've got a freezer, I can help you. Don't let your food spoil, come and bring it to my house. So we've had some of that. We ask them, what's your greatest concern for the next big storm? What is it that you're thinking about? And it's always those things that I mentioned that they bring up. And then we ask them, the third question is, what is your personal emergency preparedness plan? And what's your neighborhood emergency preparedness plan? And most people don't have either. And so we're getting people to think about what's my personal responsibility, knowing where I live and what the impacts of a storm can bring to me. So the reason that we're here tonight is that we're trying to talk with as many people as we can in Harpswell. And we were actually told that this is probably a pretty good committee for us to come to, because we are looking at sustainability and resilience of the people. What is their resilience? And we're finding that Harpswell people are pretty hardy, as we all know. One in Cundy's Harbor, we were talking about this topic, and one woman said, well, in Cundy's Harbor, we all know where the chainsaws are, and we know who has what size chainsaw. So, you know, so we're seeing the resiliency of the people. And anyway, we just wanted to let you know what we're doing and how that dovetails with some of the work that you might be doing and how we might be able to be a help to you and you to us. In the next couple of months, we're going to be going out to people's homes, older people's homes. And Harpswell Aging at Home has emergency kits. So we're going to be bringing those to them. From Maine Health, we have Datira bags. And if you're not familiar with those, they're little bags that you can put outdated or not being used medications into, add water, seal it, and it's biodegradable so that it can just go into your trash can and be disposed of. And we're taking medication boxes. So we're going to be doing a lot of education with people, older folks within our community. And so any questions of us?
Well, I would, actually, it's there. When you listed the concerns that people have in the storms, I think one other issue that you skipped is phone communication. 'Cause a lot of people
We
lose
do
their-
talk about it.
Okay,
We do.
okay. You
I
mentioned-
I
no,
gave you the top three.
Okay,
Yeah, but yes, with the phone communication, personally, for me, I have no phone if the power goes out. On the east side of Bailey Island, there is no, not power, but connection.
Service.
Cell service.
Service.
It's just gone. So without Wi-Fi, we have nothing. I used to have a telephone, a landline. However, what we're being told by a dispatcher from the Brunswick area is that Consolidated Communications is going to stop all landlines starting in 2025. So there won't be that ability to connect. And there are a couple of places, the library and Bailey Island Church both have an elevator, and they have to have a landline in order for that to communicate back to the company with the, so that's a concern for them. So yeah, we have talked about communication.
so two things there. One is that a lot of people's landline is not a copper wire connected to Consolidated, it's a phone connected to their Comcast connection.
Correct.
And those go out typically an hour after the power goes out. Consolidated is replacing what they've had in town with their fiber offering, which has the advantage that it doesn't go down when the power goes down, although a tree branch will take it out just as easily as everything else. But the power going out won't necessarily take out the fiber connection.
The fiber connection, yeah. It's only if a tree takes it down.
Right. I mean, the problem now is that Comcast has amplifiers, and the Consolidated thing does not need them. So the Comcast, they've got an hour's worth of battery in the amplifiers. And so that's why you lose phone, internet, and TV an hour after the power goes out, give or take.
I can confirm, I think the longest power outage we've had so far since I've been on Fidium is 3 hours, but it did stay up for at least 3 hours. And I suppose there's no limit in that, how is it?
Right, as long as the fiber's intact, it should just work. As long, I mean, you have to have power at your house to operate the equipment, but lots of people have generators.
Right.
But I know that a number of people expressed to me, on the Energy and Technology Committee, that the fact that you lose phone service through Comcast an hour after the power goes out, and the power goes out for more than an hour rather frequently, was a concern.
Yeah.
You can't make a 911 call at that point.
Right.
I think,
And the other piece was the generators, who's got a generator, who doesn't, and it's, if you talk to one group of people, it's like, well, we don't have any problems. And then you talk to another group of people and they have no generators. And so, yeah, it's a have and have not.
And what kind of generators? Because people couldn't get more fuel last time. People couldn't get more fuel if they're not propane and they need to get gas. they didn't have access for more than a day's worth or a day and a half's worth of generators.
And some of the generators, the little roll out of your garage generators won't run like your pump. your
Right, that's
well
what I'm,
pump.
right, right.
Yeah. And they, yeah, because there was no
Gas.
electricity in Brunswick, therefore, everybody was.
There were no gas.
So I wanted to go back to something you said about the preparation plans, whether they're personal or community. We've been talking about that a little bit, especially in the communication subgroup, and noted that in the Western North Carolina thing, there was no government, there was no outside help for 24 to 36 hours. And the people that were more likely to survive, literally survive, were those that had a community where they could reach out to someone and get help. And those who were isolated were much more likely to not survive the event.
And we have so many older people in our community who are isolated. We did hear of an idea which we think would be fabulous, and it's the red, yellow, green. And they have that film paper that will stick on a window, and if you're fine, you put a green,
Oh, I like
green in the window. If you need help but it's not an emergency, you put yellow. And if it's, I need immediate help, you put red. So if the people can't communicate out a different way, at least they would have a color-coded, and that's something which we will be presenting when we're finally done with our project to the select board, that some of the ideas that we've come up with in working with this. So that's a great point.
One of the things that we're really promoting is that sense of neighborhood, because that's a resiliency piece. So we've been going to ping pong clubs and book clubs and anything that we can do to get people to look at that issue. One of the things we would love to be able to do is to approach all the road associations, because that's where I think the grassroots starts. Partly because a lot of the things that we go to, Harpswell, like any community, is full of people who participate and people who don't. So we've been to more church clubs and stuff. We've reached everybody who is a group participant. But a lot of the more vulnerable people don't go anywhere. And that's who we'd like to sort of reach. But there's no comprehensive list of road associations in Harpswell,
There is no.
which there should be. We'd like to help with that, because if there was, we would start promoting it for all kinds of things, not just storms, but HA would love to be able to say to people, every road association needs some kind of a communication system, some way to know who's vulnerable and who's not.
Yeah, that question has come up
Right.
before,
And
and the Conservation Commission had tried to figure out a way to get this list, and there is no list in the state.
right, I know.
We've sort of, with the WaterWise program, if you're familiar with it, we've started to start reaching out on our presentations where people are signing in to have something about road associations, and if they have one, to leave a name and number. We're hoping that we then can direct people that way.
idea.
We'd love to have you be part of that.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's a
we
great
would.
idea, and it would be so good for HA.
Yeah.
When we're talking about trees, it's a deeper level, because in a lot of road associations, they'll take care of it if it's on their roads, but if it's on your land, they won't. So if you're a homeowner and your tree falls on a road association, they're not gonna be responsible for it because the tree's on your land. So there are lots of different levels. We heard this a lot, people saying, I know I have trees that are gonna fall down in a storm. I can tell you right now, but I don't have the $1,000 that somebody's gonna charge me to take it down. It is gonna fall, but particularly, we're only working with the older population. We have a lot of people who say, we can't take it down. The big ones, the little ones, everybody has a neighbor. So it isn't even just road associations, and they need to look at their plans for trees that are gonna be safe. And that's, we have a sort of a list when Howie asked, what do we ask? We sort of have a bullet sheet that we go through for people, other things are things like the fuel, because people who don't have propane ran out of fuel. Live wires that came down. We had a big issue with somebody who had pet food that they, went bad. And all you need is to know is who in your neighborhood has a generator. That's a lot of it. We did talk to the, to emergency services, and
About the fire and
Yeah.
Fire and Rescue Committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big one that people talk about is, for example, if you are on oxygen and you run out, or there are certain meds that you can't get ahead, they're controlled meds and you only get 5 days' worth, what do you do if you're on day 3
Or
and you're
insulin.
out, insulin? So the only answer in a place like Harpswell, which will never have complete access to everybody's house in a storm, you just can't do it, is to develop that neighborhood resiliency. And that's where I think the answer is.
One of the things that came up at the Resource Coalition that you told me about was in emergencies, people can't get out. They were talking about shelters in particular, but it could be other things.
Warming centers?
Yeah, they've enlisted the fire trucks, well, if you have an ambulance. But it's, I hadn't thought of it that way, that you have vehicles that can get through when others can't, and they've used it. The other thing that's come up here, Nancy has brought this up, about because we're Harpswell, water access might be the way to get to people versus roads.
They talked about that. Post-storm, that works, but it doesn't work in a storm.
And they also told us it can't be a high tide, the fire and rescue group.
Yeah.
They're not going out in a high tide
Right,
in a storm,
right,
so,
yeah. But if you're on day 5,
right.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a great
yeah.
opportunity to think.
Bodenham's doing.
The other thing we're doing is that we have a list of resources, so we're talking to people about, when we hear gaps, we talk to people about resources. Whether it be, I had someone today who needs firewood, or, where the warming centers are. So we're also just giving general resources, but we're finding that people say, well, come to my house, I have this, or I've got a phone that works, or whatever. I think in a town that's built like Harpswell, that's the answer. We'll never be able to give services to everybody all the
No, it's
time.
got to be the neighborhood stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So anyway, that's what we're doing. We also wondered if anybody here has any feedback that they want to give us, any story they have
Yes.
about something that happened that was stressful for them during the storm. Because you're Harpswell residents, so we want to grab you while we can. Did anybody have, roofs, shingle roofs? Everybody lost shingle roofs. We heard a lot about that.
We didn't,
Yeah.
surprisingly.
I didn't even,
Anybody know or have any neighbors that really had difficulty?
I don't have any neighbors.
Yeah, well, it's all anonymous, all anonymous.
We had the situation of trees down and people pitch in, just as you were describing. Sometimes even against advice.
Right, because the wires are down and near them, yes.
Yeah.
YOLO, we had a guy like that in one of the big storms after the lines went out on Oak Ledge, and we even had a guy on the street that was volunteer fireman. He said, don't touch this stuff, don't touch this stuff. As soon as he left, some young guy came up, the heck with this, and just moved away.
Well, and I know after the October storm that was so bad, used to be the bad storm before this.
Right.
People, the emergency wouldn't come out, but there you are stuck. Your road is closed off, no medicine, all of that. So people did pitch in against advice, but a lot of the advice was don't do it because the generators can back up into
Right.
the power lines. But there you are, day 9.
Right.
So in other words, the concern about doing the hack electrical hookup is really what the,
Well, or it backing up, the generators can,
right, if they're done
They're-
correctly,
backwards.
that's
Yeah.
possible, but people do hacks that can,
Right, correctly hooked up, they can't do that.
but
yeah.
that's why CMP is so big.
Correctly is doing a lot of work right there.
Oh, I know. I did also notice after that storm that CMP had put some stuff up to deal with that, which was the 3 lines on the poles were wired together with big jumper cables. So if a generator did start to backfeed, it was going to fry itself.
Interesting.
I feel better, I think.
So on my road, Gun Point is a peninsula like every place else. And people on I don't know directions, but people on this side, I'm on this side.
East.
I'm
People
not
on
on
the
the
east.
ocean, but people on this side on the ocean, you know, $50,000 damage, all this stuff. And on the NPR call today, Maine calling, one of the things that was said was FEMA, a lot of money came in, but you can't do better, you can only do exactly what you had. So, is that right? Is that, I know that the state
Yes.
money was toward resiliency,
Yes,
but,
yes, that's right.
And
so
if-
that's nuts.
Yep, and if buildings, if buildings get demolished, you can only replace it with a 200 square foot building. So like, if you look at Abner Point with Sean Baumgartner's place, Glenn's Lobsters, he has a huge building that holds all of his bait, his salt, all of that. And he would not be able to replace that whole building the way the law is today.
Wow.
And so the people here in Harpswell are actually,
Select one.
Christy
Yeah.
and Terry and all those people, they are working with the state to see if there can be some variances with that. Right now, the answer is no. And so another question that was asked at another meeting that Jim was at, my husband, that I wasn't at, is if you had a wharf, it had a building on it, you had to rebuild the wharf, and you moved the building off from the wharf, could you rebuild or bring the building back in the same? And they couldn't answer that question from FEMA. They don't know. So there's a lot that, I mean, this is fisherman stuff, but
Yeah, I do think on your question, Jay, though, if FEMA gives you the money to rebuild with resilience in mind, FEMA gives you what you were insured for,
right.
or what they're willing to kind of pay you to compensate for the loss you suffered, which is never going to be as much as what you'll need to recover from the loss and rebuild in a way that's better than it was previously. I think that's the issue that is the town dock is kind of experiencing right now down at Potts Point, where the insurance payout from FEMA wasn't as much as it costs to rebuild. And it
But
wasn't as
that's-
much as it costs to rebuild with
Resilient, which is hopefully gonna happen, I know that.
Yeah, which isn't gonna get knocked out the next time we get a big storm.
And
But
another,
that's different than not allowed to. That's, you don't have the funds.
yeah.
I don't know if it's not allowed to or not, but what I'm just saying is it doesn't happen.
Well,
it's
insurance
rare.
is like, you never get
Yeah.
back what
Right.
you.
But the other thing too is, in fact, is that's what $10,000 out of Spira went for. Christie was told by FEMA that if they were to build back better and higher, that FEMA would pay part of that.
Oh, really?
So that is what they're going to scope out in their engineering for it. And our Spira fund last week took $10,000 out of that. What's going to happen is, as Christie says, they're supposed to get reimbursed, but it's going to take years. Probably by that time that would happen. So they're going to go for designing for resiliency, take advantage of FEMA's offer. Now, I don't know how much of that is for municipalities, but I would assume FEMA would want you to build back better, because
It makes sense.
it makes sense, so that they're
Well,
not paying.
Is it possible that there's two different things here? One is, they don't want you to take the FEMA money and build something even bigger than you had before.
Right,
Just because you want something fancier and you can afford it. They don't
Correct.
want something more, they don't want increased vulnerability and exposure, but the other side of it is, if you're going to build something that is, more appropriate, given sea level rise, more resilient, I can see where that would be a different issue, two opposites there.
and I think that is what the issue, because many places, they'll tell you, I believe, that you have to have a higher freeboard if you're in a floodplain, so,
Yeah, that's the state money, the resiliency money, you had to show that it was more resilient than what, wasn't gonna be the same that would have the same problem.
which money? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I'm not
State
sure which
So
money it
working
is.
waterfront infrastructure.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
That was
yeah,
the
oh, yeah,
exact
yeah,
same.
yeah, yes,
Like
that,
50 million that came through.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you
That-
definitely
oh, yeah,
needed to
that you
rebuild
had.
better.
yeah.
But that was only like, I think only about 20 or 30 million went specifically towards working waterfront properties.
Right.
The rest of that 50 went to other projects and municipal stuff. So if you think about 30 million and the average like dock repair last year with January storm, which is probably between $500,000 and $1 million in costs, 20 million doesn't go too far.
No, it doesn't. So what you were talking about, Gail, was that state law versus federal? Because I suspect
Yes.
both need to catch up, but that was
Yes.
state.
It's a state.
So speaking with legislators would be a good idea.
Mhm.
Cloture is January 10, the last date for bills to go in.
Ah.
If
So-
you need that.
Talk to Cheryl.
Yeah.
Well, this has been good.
Yeah.
I think it's a good chance for us to have more discussions on this as we go forward too.
Yeah.
Because, you know, one of our action items in our plan is to basically engage Maine people and create climate change education and outreach. So I think this is something that we're sort of working into with the grant, the way we're writing the grant. And I look forward to maybe, as things move forward, doing more things together like this.
Anything we can do to support the committee, and if there's anything you want us to take back to the people that we'll be talking to, we're gonna be talking to 42 older people. So if there's anything that you want us to take back to them, we can add it to our little repertoire.
Sounds good. And
Okay.
in fact is, I think you have a letter of support that says something like that. coming in this. And I think, Peter, because we're going to do a subgroup in this committee having to do with outreach to the community more. I think this will be a good opportunity
It's a
to,
good way, it's a good thing to connect with, for
Yeah.
sure. The work they're doing is great.
right.
Yeah, and I
It
would,
does, does raise the question for me, off and on for, ever since I've been on this committee, we've talked about generating a list to the extent that we can of road associations.
that's what
And I
I'm
think it's
interested
been in the conservation commissions, ballpark, like, what can we do to move that forward more tangibly? Is there anything getting in the way? Is it just?
No, I think it's just us reaching out in some way and figuring out the best way to reach out.
My guess is there's no best way, there's gonna have to be 20 ways.
Exactly.
Has anyone actually looked at, your road association should, I'm sure don't file as a certain kind of nonprofit with the state. I know ours does, it's a 35-year fee. I don't know if you get a list of nonprofits.
There's no
Well,
list.
I did talk to them.
There's no nonprofit list?
There is a nonprofit list, but it doesn't separate out road associations. So it's,
You'd have to go down and guess, basically. but-
It's,
And a
you
lot
know,
of road
be hundreds.
associations are not
they don't
statutory
do that,
road
right.
associations, so it's, the problem is they're just so diverse.
Especially the really casual, informal ones that have been just a verbal agreement for decades.
But I think, to Peter's point, we have to start various ways. I think there's a need for the road associations themselves to want to be tied into something. And as we talk more about more storms and more resiliency, and if the state starts to think about funding some private roads in some way, we need some database to work from, to let them know.
We
So-
we do have the star, I mean, we know some of them.
We do.
So we should we should write them down.
We have them written down, they're just written down.
Yeah.
I will say there was an infrastructure grant last spring that we applied for on Garrison Cove and Lookout Point Road. We did not get it. That was open to, basically, it would have been a grant that somebody with a road association, if they were prepared, could have applied for. I forget how it was worded.
I don't know, I talked to my road association, and there was some, there was some resistance. You know, when the minute you say town, like, all people think about is, I don't want to be a part of it, it's more regulations, it's more hassles.
Exactly.
And there is that independence piece, because I really sort of talked to them about that idea. So I think that's a tough hurdle. People
is, and,
see
you know, that's-
regulations and restrictions when they think of organizing with the town.
It's true, and I guess if I were to be having a conversation, I mean, it's their choice, but if it means at some point you need a certain amount of funding to take care of a project, you might become more,
Right, there has to be a hook. I mean, I know
There has to
my
be a-
association has to do a big assessment to pay for, for shoreline damage. There's no money, so I think there is now some kind of an incentive that what there might not have been 2 years ago,
right, yeah.
because there is no funding for local private. So I think that's the hook, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I'd
you'll
like to
be-
work on that if you
You'll
do.
be, what do they call it? Shovel-ready?
Yeah,
If
right.
you're, if money does become available,
Exactly.
you can be.
If
first
you're
in
known and
line.
organized, I'm sure probably the key thing is at least you have the nonprofit status.
Yeah.
I talked to the guy that really runs, Jim is the president, my husband, of the road association that we have. But I talked to the guy who really runs it. And, and I said, we're responsible for any trees that come down that road, so, what's our plan? And he goes, gee, we don't have one. Well, we can talk about that next year. So, next year's a little late,
Right,
because we're heading into another winter. So
yeah.
Well, one other point, I think, I'm curious about your talking to the 42 people you're going to talk to. I'd love to hear, similar to what you did today, do you get the same information? Is it different? For me, I think about how all of this is cumulative. The first storm, not so bad. The 15th, what is going to happen now? It's, the stress builds on, and with all the other pressures, the fishing families that the kids aren't going to be able to fish because the regulations and the cost and climate change and all of that.
we're not a North Carolina level storm.
No.
If you look at it, the fishermen were greatly impacted, probably more than anybody else. But we're not that kind of storm, but we're getting there. And you're right, the 15th storm will
Right.
bring us something different than what we've had in the
Yeah.
past.
And I think on the plus side, the kind of work you're doing, what we're doing, conservation, is recognizing things need to change, and state law, federal law needs to catch up.
Well,
I think at the comprehensive plan task force, one of the working waterfront reps talked about the idea that maybe some of the smaller fishermen that have their own dock or wharf or whatever, they might be able to survive financially one repair, maybe 2 repairs, but there comes a point in time when they become tapped out, and then they lose their ability to have their own business.
well,
I
this,
have one more, I'm sorry. And now my brain just went to.
sorry about that, Gil.
I remembered. When someone approached us and said that we should come to this committee meeting, they said, there's a lot of committee meetings at town that you should go to. Do you feel that that is an important thing to have happen? Do you think that we should be presenting to other committees in town? And if so, what committees do you feel that we should?
Have you gone to Harbor and Waterfront?
Harbor and Water, well, certainly Abby, yeah. Do you think that for the older population as well?
Well,
Okay, so
Yeah,
Harbor
yeah.
and Waterfront.
Well, marine resources, you're broadening, they're front lines of using the resources, so I think you
Yeah, I mean-
could help.
And slightly different, because that shellfish focus
a shellfish focus,
Yeah.
and
Versus
versus,
now, are
Lobster.
they,
lobster
they're not
aquaculture.
all older,
They don't have
but-
to be. I
but
mean,
they
we
don't
can
have to
talk-
be. I
We
don't
can talk
think
to
if you're doing
anybody.
this
I
as a
think you're
group,
really
right?
trying to reach as many
We are,
people
yeah.
and
We are,
communities, right?
and we go as a group at times.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, yeah.
There's also a group with Maine Health that's working with schools, because
Yes.
we don't represent the whole population of Harpswell. But they're not as active because they weren't as impacted quite as much. These are sort of the 2 big target organizations. But there are other people that are trying to reach out.
So if there are other committees that you think of, just let us know, and we'd be happy to
lands,
go to any,
not so much.
Probably less than some, I think, yeah.
yeah.
This is great, thank
This
you.
is
Okay,
All right.
well, thank you for
We will
having
be in
us.
touch.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
And you do this through March, right? It
Yeah,
ends
our
in
grant's
March.
through March, but some of the, but as we said, we're minimally compensated. A lot of this is ending up being just sort of volunteer through HOP.
Yeah.
So we're not just gonna stop just because the grant's through.
And the information you're getting is gonna benefit HA, which is gonna benefit the community.
Right.
And we're gonna talk to the town too and come
Yeah,
up with.
yeah.
But people are resilient, they've got plans, everybody's got a plan, but they're not really ready for what's coming.
Yeah.
That's true.
I'm not.
And I have a list that's from Emergency Preparedness Group. The guy who developed it came from the south, where they did have tornadoes and hurricanes. And I have a list of all the things that you should have in your household. So I'd be happy to share that as
Yeah.
well.
Very good.
And the content of the emergency kit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we have a couple more things to go over. The Spirit budget, which is listed here. I went to the, well, before that, well, yeah, here's the budget, made up of basically all the projects that we have committed. None have been
Tapped yet.
tapped yet. The $10,000 should go out at the end of the year because we're finishing the first project. Went to the Budget Advisory Committee yesterday. They were very receptive to what we were doing in general. And I'll bring up Howie was there as well for energy and technology, but I'll just finish here. And one of the questions was, do we think we have enough? Are we gonna want more? And I did sort of answer that by saying that the conversation has come up from other committees, and it's something that will probably need more in-depth conversation before we make a decision. So, basically, that would sort of segue right into energy technology and your request yesterday.
Right. The Energy and Technology Committee put in a budget request for a solar consultant to advise us, because we've got a bunch of ideas, but the weeding out, all the different things and coming up with a plan to go forward with, I think we need somebody who's in the business. And in fact, I found someone who is not like a salesman for one of the solar companies, and who,
Independent or.
yeah, and in fact, he said that the state where we are now, where we have a list of things that we'd like to consider and try to figure out which ones make the most sense, is the right time to contact him, because he's just spent an enormous amount of time unraveling a mess that another town got into because they dove right in and then went, oh, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. He said, we're in the right position now to talk to him before we've done anything. And the Budget Committee had a number of questions, but basically, I don't know that,
What are you asking for?
$12,000. There's just a list of possibilities, and the question is, which of them make sense, which of them are appropriate for Harpswell? And this guy sounds like he'd be a good resource for that. There are maybe others, other consultants, but I don't think there are a lot of them.
Is this all related to town infrastructure?
Yeah, well, not all of it.
As opposed to advising town residents about?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, this is,
For town. This, I assume one of the options is the, solar panels on the old landfill.
that doesn't seem to be an option.
Oh, cool.
We've looked at that, and it's just, So this is the sort of thing that having a consultant who's done this before can answer these questions.
Don't
But
bother,
this,
basically.
this one, I can tell you that building on a landfill has some real advantages. They tend to be flat, they tend not to have shadows, they're just a big open space. Nobody complains you're gonna ruin their view, but it's more expensive to build on, because you have to respect the
You
landfill under.
can't go down.
Right, you can't
It's,
drive pilings, so you have to end up, basically what they do is they pour big concrete platforms, and the thing is just essentially floating on top. And it's more expensive to build that. But, you know, like I think South Portland, I went on a tour of theirs, but it's many acres. And,
Is that out Highland Ave?
I'm sorry,
Is that out Highland Ave?
I
The-
don't know where.
By
we-
their dump? or-
I don't know, but but this isn't big enough to make it worth the trouble. And it's not positioned quite right, and it's just, you know, it's not an ideal situation for a number of reasons. And one of them, like I say, is just the size. It's an acre or so. And so it's not worth going to all the trouble without the economy of scale of many acres with a, you know, a large facility. But there are other possibilities that, you know, the recycling center being renovated, part of that was to include a strong enough roof that you could cover it with solar panels, that it could support the weight. Whether it's gonna happen or not, but it was easy to do it when they were, you know, when they were doing that. You know, right now, the town is getting its electricity from a solar farm, but that's, you know, and that had the advantage that we could get green electricity, save a little money, but it turned out to be, for reasons that no one can explain, too inflexible. So the credits are going into accounts that were designated when we signed up. And there's like 10 or 12 CMP meters for the town, and, you know, several big ones and a number of small ones. And the
They're going against the small ones.
What's that?
And credits are going against the
Well,
small.
no, I mean, I think one of the biggest problems that caused us to get out of whack is, we replaced all the streetlights with LEDs. And the three biggest meters in the town are the LED, or the streetlights, this building, and the recycling center. And so, when they allocated the initial allocation of where the credit should go was based on the 2 years' worth of bills for all those meters. Well, now the streetlights aren't using as much electricity, and, you know, the credits are building up, and we're forfeiting some, and there's a lot of finger pointing when you say, we wanna move these. The solar field says, CMP won't let us, and CMP says, that's not our problem. And so, you know, one of the questions yesterday was, well, what are you gonna do about that? And I said, one of the solutions is to give them a year's notice and use that year to build our own solar array. But, you know, the question is, how do you figure out whether that makes sense? Because it's upfront capital cost, but over the long term, it's much cheaper. So, you know, and it was like, well, you know, one thing to do is to figure out if we're only gonna be in this, you know, this inconvenient position for another year, then we don't really need to solve the problem so much as make a plan and do something else and get out of that agreement. We have to give them a year's notice. So that would be the sort of thing to look at. You know, it's possible that there's enough space right here to put up the same number of panels as we have dedicated to us at that solar farm. The other possibility is down at Mitchell Field. Yes, the proposal on the ballot on November 5th got voted down, but that was a much larger and a commercial application as opposed to the town owning a small array down there, about an acre is roughly what it would be. And using that in place of the solar farm that we're signed up with right now. That'd be roughly the same amount of generation. And So, I mean, that's what we wanted, we want somebody who can help us sort all that out, because, I mean, I've looked at it, and the one problem is, we meet once a month, and you go through and you look at some things, you get some information, but every time you go around the loop, the goal's moved. The panels are cheaper, the incentives have changed, the electric bills are higher, all these issues. So the question is, let's get somebody who can sit down, look at all the ideas that we've come up with and say, this makes sense, this doesn't, you could do something like this, but, and then compare it to figuring out how to fix the arrangement we have currently. And just have that as a ground case to compare against. So.
Would, the other factor that I think you're talking about too is the, I don't know, social impact. I mean, like Mitchell Field seems like the third rail to me. So, do you spend time on that particular idea?
Well, I
or
mean,
not?
I think that something that we could do here, again, Mitchell Field's nice because it's wide open, you can drive pilings in, you could put this array up, you could hide 1 acre there a lot easier than you can hide 5 or 10 or 15 acres. There's a low spot that, we've looked at and said, we could just put an acre of solar panels in there, it wouldn't be anybody's way. But another possibility is to put pavilions over these parking lots, and then the solar panels on the roof of the recycling center, you get yourself pretty close to that same, that same square footage. And, the town I moved here from, when I was down there recently, I took pictures of what they did. The library parking lot is across the street from the town city hall. They covered the entire parking lot with raised, solar panels, and they put 10 charging stations in across the street at City Hall for 10 electric cars that the town has. And, that these parking lots probably would not, involve people complaining about, you ruined my view.
Yeah,
Right. So basically, a giant carport.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's what they did down in Newton, Mass. The whole parking lot at the library that's just covered with them. And they've got charging stations across the street, so.
Keeps the ice off the windshield in the winter.
yeah.
What's that?
We keep the ice off their windshields in the winter.
Yes.
Might all the neighbors parking.
Yeah,
And it would be cooler
my
in the summer.
hometown, Hingham, Massachusetts, did the same thing with parking lots for the commuter rail. And people love it because, have more lighting under it, but it's a little bit more shielded, so it's not disturbing neighbors. So people can get in and out safer when they're coming home from work in the winter, and they're coming to a car that isn't covered in snow when they're going back.
And
from work.
probably isn't 120 degrees inside in the summertime when all
Right.
that sunlight is beating down on the solar
Right.
panels instead.
Right?
So, I mean, I'm sure that that's not the least expensive project, compared to, putting them on the ground somewhere. But it still might be something that would be worth considering and factoring in, the advantages to it and see what the cost is, see whether we have enough space here, that sort of thing.
And
So,
see if the people agree. The people.
Well, it'd be good to have a concise plan to be able to present to the town, which it sounds like a consultant could do that for us.
let's see, the other thing at our recent meeting, just that, in the last month or so, Thayer, that's doing all the renovations on this building, had, I guess, been saying for years that someday you're gonna have to replace the boiler that's on the other side of that wall. Apparently, they recently said, this is the year, it's not gonna make it through the winter, so I think they may have already replaced it.
Hey, can you smell the oil?
That smells,
It's been in here for 3 or 4.
it smells almost more like glue to me. I thought it was. Maybe or
Well,
something.
I
And we're
think,
back
that-
to the mimeograph smell.
does it get upstairs, the
Yeah.
smell, up to you?
Well, they constantly walk in and out of my office, so they all smell like oil coming out.
But yesterday down here, it was a combination of oil and somebody using some kind of sanitizer to camouflage it. It's still
What I
alcohol.
don't know is, I think the new boiler may be propane.
Oh,
I think they took
well,
out an oil.
they did take a tank out. I saw it in the truck yesterday.
Well, I think that, yeah, I think the
Oh, so
new
they might
one
have
may
gone
be
to
propane,
propane.
because I don't know that, the new one can be modulated by, over a factor of 10. And I think that's
It has to
easier
be
to do
propane,
with, I think that's easier to do with propane than with oil.
They could need a lot bigger tank than that one out there, which isn't even big enough for the generator.
Yeah. Well, that's possible.
Um,
Well, we don't have, well, propane they can do, yeah, that's true.
Sorry?
I was thinking natural gas, we don't have it here, but we don't have
Not
it.
much, but it's essentially the same,
Yeah,
same mechanism, it's just that, but an oil burner is very different, and I don't, you know, I don't know that you can modulate the amount of flame as easily with oil as you can with gas.
I
So
see.
natural gas or propane, you can get these boilers that, instead of just being on or off with a giant ball of flame inside them or nothing, they can, they can modulate the amount of flame inside and over a range. This one is a range of a factor of 10, so it can be putting out anywhere from 40,000 BTUs to 400,000 BTUs, depending on what the demand is in the building.
I see.
And makes them way more efficient, because instead of just creating a huge amount of heat and trying to put it someplace and then nothing for a while, it can, you know, just match
Gotcha.
what the demand is. A couple of guys on the committee are in that business, and they agreed with the choice of the replacement. That they thought it was properly chosen, so.
Well, good.
So is the funding for the consultant is the ask for that to be part of from the Spira account? Or no?
Well, put it this way, they went directly to the Budget
Budget.
Committee. And I went with our request. I didn't even know they had put that in.
And I didn't know that our request said something about planning for solar.
Well, basically, just as part of what I give them, I tell them how we might use the money, and the first thing on the bullet point was solar. So Christie.
They noticed that there were two applications for what sounded like the same thing, so
Yeah,
that's,
yeah,
that's what I think part of yesterday's meeting.
And that was part of it, and then so anyhow, Christie called me and said, you know, she brought this up to my attention, so, she says, I think they're leaning from administration to use Spira funds, which they certainly can do, so. I said, it was too bad I didn't know about it 2 days ago, I would have asked for more. But we talked about it, we says, we really shouldn't run out of money next year because we still haven't expended the 27.
Some of the things allocated never happened, really.
They're still in
Or in
process.
process.
They're committed, though, they're allocated. So anyhow, the Budget Committee they're gonna discuss how they're gonna handle that next week.
I mean, I thought that Spira being a contingency reserve account was not quite the right place for it. I mean, we want to hire someone to do this.
Right.
If they want to say, okay, we'll give you half of that, and if you need more, go to the select board to pull money out of Spira, that's fine with me. I just figure we would like to hire someone to do this, and therefore I thought it should be a budget item that the town says you can have this money.
It's pre-planned, so to speak, so that,
Right.
since you have that advantage.
And it's a good argument for it, you know.
Right. I mean, you know, our most recent thing in this regard turned out rather well. We hired a consultant for roughly that same amount of money to guide us on a similar thing, or in a similar way on the broadband question. And, you know, we hired someone who's in the business of helping towns in Maine get their broadband service upgraded. Again, not as somebody who is a representative of one of the companies, but someone who comes in as an independent consultant. And, you know, we paid something, you know, between $10,000 and $15,000, so there were some add-ons when, after they did their report, they said, if you want us to, we can do the following, and I think we added, you know, we took some of the add-ons. And the result of that was that they had this detailed report on the existing communications in the town. And I think one of the add-ons was to go and shop that around to other possible suppliers. And then Fidium came in and said, we're gonna do the north part of Harpswell. And we said, well, what about the rest of the town? And they said, if the town gives us $1.3 million, we'll wire the rest of the town. And we said no. And they did it anyway. And I think that happened because they had this report that this consultant provided them that showed what, you know, what their potential customer base was. And I think that was money well spent, because, I mean, the reason they were looking for money was, in a lot of places around Maine, they go in a smaller town, they say, $500,000, we'll do this, but we'll get you $400,000 in grants out of the programs to provide broadband.
Rural and broadband,
Yes, we don't qualify for those. So when they that number, we said, well, we don't, they said, we'll get grants. We said, no, we've already looked, we don't qualify for those grants. That was part of this report also, was that here are the rules for the grants, you don't qualify, right? So we were aware of that. And so we said, no, you know, we're not gonna do that, and they went ahead and did it anyway. So I think that was money very well spent, because, you know, they've pretty much wired the whole town with their fiber system, so.
Have you heard how that penetration is? It's gotta be, I mean, the price performance is better, and most important to me, reliability has so far been better.
I don't know, but I you know, I think
They're
that there's.
pushing hard.
Right, and as a matter of fact, one of the things that I suggested was that we might want to get the rep from Fidium and maybe with HA and maybe the Energy Committee to put together some sort of either how-to video or website or, you know, something. So how you can go, the problem is that you don't get television with Fidium.
No, you don't.
But you get a Roku TV or a Fire Stick or whatever, and, you know, you can use that instead, but.
And a lot cheaper.
By the time you get a lot of stuff, it's
Well,
getting up there.
Well,
Well, it depends what you already have, I
Right,
guess, but.
right.
One thing, because I did this, but I think for somebody like myself and maybe who aren't really, really up to date on all the equipment and everything, I think a nice program for HA would be this is what you have to do to replace. In other words, you have to shop around for what streaming services you want. How easy is it to get local broadcast? I'm still figuring this all out, but I
Right.
think that could be a really interesting something for HA to present.
That does seem like a perfect project for.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
And
not
with a
for
lot of
HA,
patience.
just for a lot of people. If you want to make the change and you're used to using cable, how do you replicate that? Because you gotta pull something together. You mentioned the Roku, which you can do. There's a lot of options.
And, you know, and I think that Fidium has agreements that will get you a discount from a lot of the streaming services.
Yeah, I have to check that one first.
Right, but, you know, when I first had contact with him several years ago, you know, when he told me, well, we don't do TV, we just get you internet. And I said, that's gonna be a little bit of a problem in this town, because there's gonna be a lot of people who are not gonna want to wait for their grandchild to come over and change the channel for them. So, I think that it might be worth their effort, you know, at Fidium to put something together that, you know, work with us to provide that information.
That's a really great idea.
You know, I think that HA might be the better vehicle for it.
For the
because-
training at least.
Well, just because I think that I don't want Comcast going, hey, why are you telling people how to go to our competitor?
The other thing would be to put something together in a program and give it to the TV station to,
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, does TV programs
I know that.
Right.
regularly, so that,
Right,
and also, they have volunteers who do tech support, so,
right,
house calls.
right.
Because it's
I've done a
gonna
few.
take a few hours for me to figure out. I mean,
Yeah.
I've started it, but
Right, but, you know, it might be nice if there was just, you know, a couple of, a couple of prearranged things that you could just, you know, say, all right, I'll be happy with Netflix and my Roku TV, here's how you do it. Or,
yeah,
I want
something like that.
YouTube TV because I want the local channels and, you know, that's where you get to almost the same price as Comcast.
By the way, I'm trying to figure out, you know, if you don't subscribe to YouTube, you get a lot of commercials. And now we're using it for the town meetings that we're televising. So now I have to look at commercials to look at a selectmen's meeting?
Really?
I don't know,
I
I'm not
didn't re-
sure.
I think if you can specify that your channel is non-commercial, and I've been told anyway, that then YouTube won't run ads against it.
Because
That
the
would be
town
something
wouldn't
to-
get any refund back from YouTube like a lot of content people do, so that would make sense.
But anyhow, then maybe that's another thing you would include in this type of informational.
Well, there's YouTube and there's YouTube TV,
Right.
right? Two different things.
Great, I'd love to know the difference, but not here. That's what happens when you start talking. You're throwing terminology out. I just never had investigated it enough, and I don't know that I'm the only one. So,
Not.
so anyhow. Well, good.
One last question. So you're talking about programming specific to switching to Fidium? Or to a fiber system?
Well, right.
Or non-TV system. I mean,
Right,
really.
'cause the issue is that Comcast generally is internet and TV, or just TV, I suppose, for some people, but probably, you know,
Bundle, as
in
they
this
call it.
location, you know, I think most people are probably going for all three, phone, TV, and internet.
Yeah.
And the problem is that I think you can get phone through Fidium, but
Yeah.
what he said to me when I asked about TV, he said, well, we think that's a 30-year-old model, cable TV, which it's true. But, you know, I think that they should probably put some effort into helping people, you know, switch, with, you know, as seamlessly as possible. And I don't know that they've given that a lot of thought. But I actually need to get in touch with them anyway, so I will ask them about that.
The other thing to keep in mind if Hop does something is the other you can get, which I have, like it's a DirecTV satellite, which is more or less a direct emulation, but that's a separate product.
Yeah,
that-
yeah.
that I
They're all
got.
separate products.
And it's
And
not cheap.
Comcast is changing their TV.
Oh.
I think we're gonna, because.
Well, I think one of the things that's happening with Comcast is we have competition now, and I think that they're in the process of upgrading their equipment so they can offer us more. So that's another advantage to having done this.
Yeah, but anyhow. Okay,
So should we schedule a special meeting for this group to consult on broadband and TV?
and how to
I
get
want
it-
to be able to watch this show, how do I do it?
I'd prefer if you would just come and fix it. Just make it happen.
Well, good. It's getting kind of late, and I didn't know if the Communication and Resource Information Subgroup had anything to report.
So there's a couple of things that were takeaways from the most recent meeting on that. One was probably not to do a December article in the Anchor about updating various information, but do one shortly thereafter, especially after meeting with Abner Point and Bethel Point residents on December 9th. And then maybe also talk about a sustainability cafe idea for us, stealing shamelessly from Brunswick.
And before we leave, we want to hear the update on it, but sorry, Peter.
No, yep. We also talked about developing a resource card, a small card that you could hand out to people that would talk about emergency services and various related things. So we're kind of working on that. There were a couple follow-ups, mostly in Jay's situation. And then we also talked about Efficiency Maine and pointing out that Efficiency Maine offers some beneficial services to folks, but it's very difficult to sign up. So we're going to be looking into how to make that easier for folks, or what we could do to help them, so that when they're done signing up for their TV over Fidium, we can sign them up for Efficiency Maine.
Combine the programs.
There you go. So, and we'll meet again in a few weeks.
And I think we were talking about doing things over the website, making this, what we're talking about, and making the information available on our webpage, as well as direct communication with groups.
In particular, I think I'd like to make a Spira page under environment or RSC or something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Peter had offered, Peter, Peter had offered to kind of focus in on Spira and highlight that and do some work on that so that it becomes more well-known in the community how we're using it.
So I like the table that you did for this meeting. I thought that was great. I'd like to add a column that's sort of like funds leveraged, right?
That'd be nice.
Because
Yeah.
that, I think, would would make it easier for people to vote for Spira in future
Yeah.
opportunities. That's where we are.
So,
All right.
how was your Resiliency Cafe?
Sustainability.
Sustainability gap.
Sustainability.
You almost got it.
Hi, Flair.
Yeah, there's been 2 cafes so far, one in October and one in November. The next one is happening next Saturday at Curtis, so if any of you are popping by Curtis Memorial Library, I'll be upstairs in the morning. And then I've had 2 other events with Brunswick's Repair Cafe,
Yep.
where I've just sat and tabled with them. The actual cafes have been all right. Typically 2 to 3 people come in for each cafe, and each of those people have had really good conversations that I've had with them. But it's been a slow start. I think most of these resources are slow starts, so
Yeah.
regardless. But most of those conversations people have been about smaller, maybe not smaller, but more mundane, everyday questions, a lot of trash and recycling questions that people have. Because I guess recycling is now a super confusing thing, which it kind of is. And then a lot of questions about kind of entry-level renewable technologies and renewable resources. So people wanting to dip their toe in with like a heat pump, or start talking about solar panels on their roof, or those sorts of things. Or water heaters has been a big thing people have kind of asked about.
The heat pump water heater, they're
Yep.
pushing that.
So those have been the big topics to come up there. I'll say it's been a bit more successful having the cafe at the Repair Cafe so far. I'm not
Okay.
sure if that's just because it's a new resource, so people don't quite know about the Sustainability Cafe yet, but at the Repair Cafe it's been good because people often hang around there waiting for their stuff to get seen or repaired, and in that waiting time often it's a good place for people to go, oh, maybe I do have questions about,
Yep.
can I recycle glass? Or some guy came up to me and asked about chicken tractors, and I was like, I have no idea what a chicken tractor is, but I'll look it up and try and help you with it, who knows? So yeah, that's the update. It's
Okay.
kind of a mellow start, but it's been really good conversations I've had with people and hopefully been useful.
Good.
Great.
We do want to shamelessly borrow
Yeah,
from.
Yeah,
we'll give
Yeah,
something in
maybe,
return when we get that going.
Yeah.
yeah, maybe getting into next year, we can see about having one Sustainability Cafe at the Harpswell Cafe.
Yeah, I think the next one is March, maybe? The
We
next,
usually don't have them over like December, January.
Next one.
right.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so far has done 2 a year, so October
Okay.
and I think March.
Okay, cool.
Sounds great.
Great.
You're invited.
Oh, thank you. I'll do the good work for you, Jay.
Are there any other things to be brought up? Ken, did you want to bring anything up from town lands or anything? Or-
I don't, but you did remind me, we need to start doing our king tide monitoring for the winter, so put that on our agenda.
You know, it is interesting, Burr Taylor was on the Conservation Commission when we started this project in 2016 of the picture post project.
Yeah.
He left the committee years ago, but he kept sending tide updates
Yep, I'm on the list.
until, I think, in the fall.
Yeah, now you mention it's been a little while.
He stopped. He finally said, I think, it's time for me to drop off of it. And I have to say that the Conservation Commission has been kind of thinking in different directions, and we haven't picked up much on that program. So,
We'll try to, I mean, like, so we have dedicated volunteers for different sites around town, so we'll
yeah,
try to at least keep something going there.
yeah, so, but anyhow, that is good project for the winter when we get our highest tides and storms.
Yep, in daylight.
And in daylight,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
So I had one question. When the folks from HA were talking about, preparedness, do we have something on the committee's webpage that just has a list of things that everybody should have, or a reference to someplace that has something like that? I mean, I think that would be a really handy thing to just have a checklist, they ask people, do you have this stuff, and they go, no, and I think that
It comes out through Emergency Management Administration.
yeah.
Right before a storm, there'll be a nice Facebook post, and I always want to find that again, and I never can, but that,
There might be something for our committee page, just to
Yeah.
Yeah.
have if it's a link to somebody else's or whatever, but just, that'd be the sort of thing to encourage everyone to have a look at.
It'd be nice to have a sort of consistent one, because I think one of the challenges you have, TV station puts one out, HA may put out one. I think if you could have a
yeah.
unified one, I think that you hand out the transfer station, or HA hands out, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a good idea.
Marianne and Howard, we can chat about that if it's something you want to do, because Gail and Martha do have that list of, where all the warming centers are, where you call if you don't have your medication, and the storm's coming, and you don't have anywhere to refill it, so they already have those resources printed out. All you need to do is put them onto the website.
And that has come up, in fact, as I think Jay's trying to set up a meeting with Mike Drake, the town has a lot of services in place, we just don't know about them.
Yeah.
So we were talking about it on the outreach committee, about getting this information consolidated in one place so it can be on the town website.
And the town website is a good place, but having a resource card or, a sheet that we can pass out, because a lot of people, even if the website were easier to navigate, wouldn't go there anyway, they just don't think to go there, so.
Well, the thing that you hand out could just be printing out what's on that
Absolutely.
that
Exactly,
page.
Absolutely.
exactly.
You had the same thing in both places.
Right.
Yep.
Or have it out in the lobby in the town office with other
Right.
printers.
I just looked up Emergency Management Administration and found it, so I'm sending it to you.
Oh, thanks.
And it's not it's a long list, and build a kit, emergency supply list. So pulling from that as opposed to, or you could do a link, but it's not,
No, I think we can
Not
talk
very
about how the best way.
user-friendly.
This
Jay,
is
are you
from
sending
Howard.
us a link to what's on the town website?
no, to what's on emergency management preparedness.
Is that, is it towns, or no? Okay.
State.
State.
Okay.
But it
Which
would-
county?
Could pull from.
Which county?
Well, it's not specific.
Well, it's interesting, because Jay is working in that area, and we're in Cumberland County Emergency Management Organization, and Saginaw has its own. And the Saginaw's, I understand, is quite informative, but yet,
Well, Cumberland County uses Code Red,
okay,
which is I don't know, Art Howe would never jump in on what it was all about. And then Saginaw has adopted a different system I'm forgetting right now, but it seems much easier to sign up for and access and understand. But we're part of Cumberland County, even though historically there was an effort to join Saginaw County. But I'm on the list for Saginaw from my West Bath days, and they're very informative. So,
And that's a little bit of the disconnect too, I think, because we know we're part of MCOG, for example, Maine Coast Council of Governments, for so many things. But we're part of Cumberland County for emergencies. So it's a little bit of a disconnect
Yeah.
when you're thinking about it. But we're gonna put it together. If there is no other items,
We're adjourned. I'll
we will
record it.
adjourn at
Motion to adjourn.
5:57.
good meeting.
Yes, thank you all.